King starts the chapter with the story of Helen Taussig, a pioneer of pediatric cardiology. As you read these pages, you can see the many challenges she encountered and the perseverance that took her through them. She battled learning disabilities, sexism, an unclear path, and even deafness. Her exercise of the virtue of perseverance has likely saved thousands of lives. The contrary, the vice of intellectual perseverance in the direction of deficiency, is intellectual irresolution. The person who gives into irresolution gives up too easily in the face of difficulty. I've had to face this myself. I was privileged to be allowed to take algebra when I was in 8th grade. Only a few kids at my school were allowed to do that. I didn't fail the class, but I was on the brink of doing so. It was clear that for whatever reason, I don't remember the details here over 40 years later, I just wasn't getting it. I could have given up. I took the class again the next year. It was the same textbook, the same teacher, even the same classroom. This time around, it was easy. I don't know if it was a case of my brain maturing to the point of being able to handle the necessary level of abstraction, or paying attention better, or whatever else it might be. But my experience was entirely different. One of my children had a different kind of experience with math. Her 3rd grade teacher had a mantra: girls aren't good at math. This was based on her own experience of not being very good at math. The problem was that with the constant repetition coming from a beloved and respected figure, my daughter began to believe it. The teacher said it, girls aren't good at math. She was a girl, so she assumed it must be true. It took us a year to deprogram her from that false belief. There's also a contrary in the direction of excess. King calls this intellectual intransigence. Sometimes we should let go of our quest for knowledge. We can be seeking to know something that cannot be known or is not appropriate for us to know. When I was writing my dissertation, I had to read hundreds of books and articles. Each article or book I read would point to other sources I needed to consider. Finding this chain of resources was necessary and useful, but it was also unending. I had to decide at some point to stop researching and write the thing, recognizing that completeness wasn't possible. On pages 156 through 157, King lists 4 features of those who exhibit the virtue of intellectual perseverance. He says that they continue in their intellectual projects with serious effort, despite obstacles that make it difficult for them to get, keep, or share knowledge. They think wisely about which projects to pursue and for how long and by what means. They desire to overcome obstacles for the sake of knowledge, and they react to obstacles in emotionally appropriate ways, not in extreme or irrational ways. They may be disappointed by their failures, but they are not crushed. Have you been aware of experiencing these for yourself yet? If so, how difficult was your experience? With your own field of study in mind, which of these do you think will be most important for you to develop next? Why? Pages 160 and 161, King identifies 2 broad categories of obstacles. He writes, obstacles to knowledge are as diverse as weeds in a garden and just as annoying. Some obstacles are internal to us. These include our fears, self-doubt, depression, discouragement, procrastination, boredom, lack of skill or knowledge, mental limitations, and the like. Other obstacles encroach us from the outside: injustice, poverty, physical and emotional threats, social distractions, technological distractions, and so on. 2 kinds of obstacles, those from the inside and those from the outside. When I consider his list, I don't see any mention that I haven't had to overcome at some point in my life, these internal ones. When it comes to external obstacles, I've been more fortunate. I don't think I've had to overcome injustice or physical and emotional threats. When I was working on my doctorate, I wasn't living in poverty, but I did have to work 3 jobs to pay the bills, even while going deeper into debt. Some of you have faced and still face today obstacles I've never experienced, or to degrees far beyond what I've had to overcome. And I know the pandemic has been extremely difficult on many students. On page 162, King turns to the role of wisdom and intellectual perseverance. We need wisdom as we choose our projects and how much we invest ourselves in them. An illustration that comes to mind is the idea of life, thinking of life as climbing a ladder, leaning against a wall. Climbing the ladder takes work. I hope to get to the top someday. But what if the ladder I'm climbing is leaning against the wrong wall? Or to change the orientation, thinking about driving somewhere. If I set out for my destination and drive longer, harder, faster to get there, I may get there more quickly. But what if I discover I'm on the wrong road or going the wrong direction on the right road? All the speed in the world won't help me in those cases. I do family history research as a hobby. One of the lines I started working on back in the 1980s was one of my wife's great-grandfathers. We knew his name. We'd seen a death certificate for his brother that listed a name for their father. But when we talked to the relative who had provided the information for that document and spoke with other relatives, everyone told us a different story. If I'd spent inordinate time on the problem then, or in the next 20, 25 years, I would have gotten nowhere. It was only in the past few years, as DNA tests became available, that I was able to add a last piece of data to the puzzle and identify his family of origin. King investigates what it takes to gain the virtue of intellectual perseverance. On page 170, he writes, "We can develop perseverance through practice and by thinking about inspiring stories. We can commit to doing hard things over the long haul. We can choose to enter cultures that value grit and perseverance. We can find like-minded friends who will encourage us to stick with our projects." To these ideas, he adds the wisdom of Carol Dweck, a proponent of a growth mindset over a fixed mindset. Which of these ways he mentions has most helped you develop intellectual perseverance? Which of these do you think are readily accessible to you now and can help you increase this virtue in your life? Do you have, with Dweck, a growth mindset, a conviction that change can come, that you can improve? One of the major factors in my own intellectual life was probably the household in which I grew up. My father was an engineer, my mother a dental hygienist. Our house was full of books. I remember looking at these books when I was a kid. Some I understood. I liked reading volumes from our Collier's Encyclopedia, for example. Others I didn't understand. I could tell that my dad's advanced math books were math, but many of the symbols and figures I saw there just looked like squiggly lines. Having books like these in my house and being encouraged to read, whether to read these books or the stacks we picked up in our regular trips to the library, helped me develop intellectual curiosity and perseverance.